All of the food we eat and much of the clothing we wear comes from plants and animals that are raised on farms. Farms are different in type, in size, and even in name.
Welcome to Barn Talk. What happens at the barn stays in the barn, but not today. We're going to let it all out for you guys. Today is going to be a guest episode. Got a real good guest coming to Southeast Iowa to just lay it on us here in the barn. Before we get into it, you guys know the drill. Share the show with the people that you know. The more that you guys do that, the more that this show grows, the more guests we can get on, the more episodes we can make. Another way you can help out Barn Talk is you can leave a review on Spotify or Apple. The more that you guys do that, the more it gives our show credibility, and that credibility leads to more guests, and the more guests, the more the show grows. So it's just a vicious cycle that we really appreciate all you guys leaving reviews, letting us know your thoughts about the show. Love hearing from you guys. And last thing you can do to help out here on Barn Talk and also help out and support our family farm is support our direct-to-consumer meat business, Farmer Grade. FarmerGrade.com. Started about a year and a half ago. Got all kinds of cuts available from Wagyu, beef, pork, chicken. Might have a little lamb coming soon. All from American family farms that are transparent and showing what they do. You can always use code BARNTALK to save 10% off your next order. And that's all I got.
Don't use Torque Talk because it'll charge you 10% extra. It'll give you the family, treat you like family.
That's right. You'll get $10 more added to your total. That's kind of what I've done to help stop Dad from coming and using that code so much. He was abusing it, so we had to tone it down a little bit. But yeah, we don't have a Patreon on this show. We got what's called a Metreon. Farmer Grade, treat that like a Metreon. So we're not going to send you some gimmick T-shirt or some bumper sticker that's going to fall off after 2 months. Buy yourself a box of meat, and that's going to directly help out this show. I mean, we're already upgrading. Dad got some wood here behind us. We're upgrading the studio. We're upgrading the equipment. We got our first, well, not first, but we hired somebody this year part-time to help us out with keeping us organized, reaching out to guests, those sort of things, so we can really try to grow this show, because I feel like we're really on to something. We just got to break through the glass ceiling and really get an amazing guests on like we're going to have on today.
We're building systems. Building systems. We realize our own problems, our own weaknesses, organization being one of them. We both kind of fly by the seat of our pants, which works fine till it doesn't. So we're trying to improve upon that. And speaking of systems and getting things figured out, our guest today, I think you're going to find really, really interesting. I would not know anything about this guy if it wasn't for the fact that he reached out to us and actually asked me to come on his podcast. And I was blown away because it was kind of a world that I didn't know much about. And so if you're a trucker, you'll probably know him as soon as we start. He's built a really awesome website, and then he got into the podcast world kind of like we did, and he shows a lot of people involved in his industry in the trucking world, and it's a neat platform, and I think it's going to be good for everybody because just the way he's built it and his experiences in business, I think you're going to really enjoy. So without any further ado, let's get into it.
Jared Flynn, welcome to Barn Talk.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming on, man, making the trip. I know Dad had a good time on your show, but before we get into it, why don't you just let people know where they can find you? Yeah,
so BulkLoads.com is our parent company. We started that going on 15 years ago. And I don't say most, I think a lot of your audience knows who we are, farmers and truckers that listen to this podcast. But we're an online marketplace, and we serve trucking companies, shipping companies, basically anything in bulk freight shipping is our core company. And probably as we move along, I can share some of the other companies that we do. But yeah, BulkLoads.com. You can find us there. Super active on LinkedIn, probably more than any other social media channel, but you can find us on all the social channels.
Who's home feeding the pigs? I saw the LinkedIn post.
Yeah.
I'm like, look at that. Now I know why I like that guy. See,
There was a sixth sense there.
That's right. I knew that guy had to have pigs.
Yeah.
So I have 3 children. My oldest 15-year-old daughter, 12-year-old boy, 10-year-old boy, and then another 10-year-old boy. My wife's like, you got to make them all do this.
Yep.
But the 12-year-old, he's kind of the go-getter, and he's the one. His name's Thatcher. But if I tell him, hey, and I did when I left yesterday morning, I was like, hey, buddy, here's the feed. You got to make sure, this time feed them, check the waters. We have the pigs a couple hundred yards behind the house. So we have a water going up to there. I didn't get a Dethar in there, so I told him you got to make sure to chop ice in the morning, make sure they're good. So, but yeah, the middle guy should be taking care of them as we speak. So
there you
That's
go.
good.
Yeah.
How many you got?
So it's more of it's been more of a hobby. And yeah, here's the thing. Like when I was a kid, we raised hogs and like never wanted to touch those things.
You.
Never wanted to, like the smell. I could see like that, the smell just interacting with them, the squealing. And when we moved out to this property, which we were blessed years ago to move to, there was just like, and I can't explain, but this, like, I want that for my children.
Yep.
Like I wanted to run so far from it, but like, I want my kids to experience the same thing that I did, just those ethics and having to do that. Yeah. And again, and blessed, like we don't have to raise pigs.
Right.
But we're fortunate too. We usually buy 2 or 3 feeders every 6 months and we'll raise them up. We keep one and then we sell the other 2.
Yep.
We have a local butcher that we take them to. So yeah, it's just it's a fun hobby. So yeah, we got those. We have a couple cows, I think 40 something chickens, 2 dogs and a cat.
There you go. Yeah, homesteading. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
My dad.
Now he just needs a bunker.
Yep, there you
gotta
go.
get
He
a
might
bunker.
have one, but he's not going to tell you
Yeah,
that on the podcast.
Right.
He did have an Atlas bumper sticker on the truck when it came
Oh,
in,
there you
so it's
go.
probably there.
Yeah.
My dad, his 2 favorite phrases growing up when he would get good and frustrated with pigs, he'd just look at me, and I was the youngest, so I had a lot of cover to start, so he would chew one of my brothers before he got to me, and then he would just look at me and he'd say, Torque, a man is a damn fool to raise pigs, and then he'd just turn and walk off. But then one time I heard him say, he's like, you can always trust a man who raises pigs because they know what true chaos really is.
Yeah.
I was like, that's pretty good. It's pretty good. So that served me well. So your stock just went way up.
Our operation is pretty small. The that picture that I took that you saw, it was inside this livestock trailer, and again, it was actually one that our neighbor had up the road. It was in the weeds. One day I went by and I was just like, would you be willing to sell that? Which he was like, I plan on keeping that one day. I was like, really? Yeah. But he ended up selling. But I figured out, so we don't have loading chutes. So the trick I figured out is you back that livestock trailer up to the pen, you start feeding the pigs inside the trailer.
Yep.
And then when it comes butcher time, which is next week,
Yep.
You put the feed out, they run up in there, you shut the door, and
They run right out.
You're good to go.
So tell us a little bit about your childhood. You mentioned that your family raised pigs. So did you grow up on a farm?
Yep.
How'd that go?
So I grew up about 50 miles kind of west and a little bit north of St. Louis, rural area. Went to Troy High School, but lived on a 240-acre farm, small town of Truxton. 70 people in our town. Our family made up, I think, 1/10 of the population of Truxton. So super small farm, farming community, 240-acre farm. By the time I was born in 1980, and I can remember by the time I can really remember my grandpa, they were selling a lot of the assets. So my grandpa, World War II vet, he came back from the war, and his mother actually purchased this farm for him, and which was the same farm I grew up on. My dad grew up on, grew up in the same house. But by the time I could remember, the farming operation was starting to dissipate. They had actually sold some of the farms that they had acquired. A lot of the machinery that I remember was like already parked in the weeds. The earliest memory I can remember actually seeing this livestock semi-truck loading cows up down by the barn, and just like, you're still like, it's such an early memory, you don't know what's going on, but we were getting rid of the herd at that time. So really at that time, my dad had left the farm. He actually was working in concrete for a little while. But for me growing up, my dad and uncle eventually started a sawmill.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it was my uncle's idea, and they got together and they bought this I think it was a 1930s or 40s sawmill. So old belts, no guards. I mean, you're exposed all the way. But they put that on the farm, and at the earliest memory I had, I can remember we would go out there, and Dad actually built stools for us to work the machinery. So again, I don't know how tall we would have been there, but I can remember Dad building these stools so we were high enough to be close to this 5-foot diameter blade going X miles per hour. But then even we built, so the core business was we made railroad ties out of the core of the log, and then all the excess, we made boards that we built pallets out of. So I can remember we had stools built, we had these big nail guns that we'd have these slots that we would nail these pallets together. And at that time, there's, manufacturing keeps dissipating, but we would sell a lot of the pallets to the manufacturers down in St. Louis. So that was really my farm work. I mean, there was a little bit of livestock, but mostly even when I was around, the hogs that we did, it wasn't a huge operation.
Yeah.
Even some of the bottle calves that we raised and chickens, it wasn't the full-fledged money making. It was the sawmill that was the core business.
Is the sawmill still going, or did it stop?
No,
or?
so that's a story in itself. So I have 3 brothers and a sister, but my 3 brothers, we worked out at that mill with my dad and my uncle all the way through. Again, you learn at that time, because I can still remember summers. We'd be off in the summer, and Dad would fire it was a big Detroit motor that he would fire up at 7:00 in the morning, and you had 5 minutes by the time you heard that thing start to get out there and be ready to go. But I could just remember you could hear that, but I can remember we'd get up and go out there and just dreading every time. You're just like, why was I put in this position to go out here? But we all had our stations, my brothers, that we would do, and he'd get that thing going, and usually he'd be running the big saw, which is cutting the logs in the mornings, and then afternoon, you're cutting the big cants down into boards and then nailing the pallets together. Yeah. But we did that all the way through high school. None of my brothers wanted to stay doing that. I went on to college. One went into the military. The other 2 went into the construction trades. So my dad, he had hired people over the years, some Amish workforce for a long time. But he had such a hard time finding labor. And again, this is sawmill hardcore labor that I think it was after my youngest brother, he was gone, that he just said, hey, I'm going to sell this and go do something else. So that was the end of the sawmill era.
You definitely had a good work ethic instilled upon you. And like many people, that story of when he fired it up, you knew you had to be there. Like, I know.
I was the only one out of my brothers. I tell a story not to just, it kind of probably led me to go to college more than my brothers continuing in construction. But when I was 16, it was 2 weeks before school, I was running this radial arm saw, and been running the saw 10 years before. So just knew this machine in and out. And we were running this, I think it was cottonwood or sycamore, really wet wood. So when you're cutting it, like it's just soaking wet, you can see almost the sap dripping. So it's real slick. But I was running this, and just like any other day, but went to go push the cant back. My hand slipped off the cant, and I punched the saw blade. Oh. It knocked this finger and this finger all the way off to it was hanging by the skin and all the way down to my thumb here. So I can remember pulling back and looking, and these fingers are just dangling off the back.
Holy shit.
And it was right before, it was August, so it was so hot. And a lot of times we take our shirt off working in the mill because we're sweating. But I can remember grabbing my T-shirt and throwing it on my hand and just screaming. And then my brother comes up and he's like, get in the freaking truck. And, so we're running out. But I can remember running to the truck, and that towel, or that my shirt soaking with blood in that, and just sitting there and taking us to community hospital. And then from there, and this is flashing back, but then getting flighted down to St. Louis, where they had to do a lot of reconstructive surgery.
Yeah, you're lucky that you got.
Yeah, you got
so
them.
You can see they're a little bit. They're a little shorter.
They're a little stubby.
A little stubby. This one I can't bend at all. They froze this knuckle, but praise God, I can still use the hand well. After that, I always told the only thing I can't do is make a fist. So in a fight, I'd always have to. It'd have to be the left hooks. I can't really do the right hand.
Yeah.
Wow,
that's awesome.
Good.
That's great. I mean, that's a crazy story.
But I say this, it's like it's it's led me to where I am. So it's just part of my story. I don't say it to brag or to make a big scene, but it's just, it's part of my story that I am.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is those life experiences, the stuff. And what's funny about it is when you're in it, like you and your brothers, like you don't think anything, you didn't think anything of it because that was all you knew. And then when you get out, like I'm sure when you were in college, you start talking to people and you tell them, those stories, they're just looking at you like your parents crazy, what's wrong with you? And it's like, we talk about growing up on a farm, and so many farm kids are this way. It's like when we would go to school, I'd tell the story, the teacher would be like, well, what'd you do this summer? Where'd you go on vacation? And I'd look around and these kids would be like, we went here, we went there. It's like, we didn't go anywhere. We didn't go anywhere. It's like, we just worked. That's what you did in the summer.
Yeah, we took one vacation I can remember as a family to Colorado, and it was later on in life. And that was the only time vacation I remember. You talk about school, I can remember, like, so when you're messing with a lot of hardwoods, and especially that wood, if you're touching a lot, your hands get stained. Yeah. So like when you're done, like within hours, your hands are like black. That sap and stuff, it just creates this. And as much as you wash with soap and water, it like stays in there. The only time you can get it out is if you like bleach it or some kind of really hard. Well, I'd always go to school and my hands would just be black, like the inside of my hands. And I can remember almost getting made fun of for that.
Yeah.
And one time I was telling my dad, I was like, man, I go to school and these people, and actually I think there was even a teacher made mention, and my dad said this, I can still remember. I don't think I've ever told this story before, but my dad goes, you tell that teacher, when he asks what that is, he just tell that teacher it's hard work.
Yep.
And that's what happened. So I remember I was up there, I was turning in an assignment. It was a science teacher. And he's like, what's wrong with your hands? I was like, it's hard work is what that is.
Yeah.
So
that's your badge of honor.
That's what my dad told me.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I've never told that story, I don't think so.
So like how much wood would you cut in a day? Like would it be a full 8-hour day, 10-hour day, 12-hour day, like every day? Or how is it structured?
Yeah, so we started at 7 a.m. is when the mill got fired up. And over the summers, we would probably end around 3:30 or 4. And I say that the only reason why is because we played baseball. So they'd want to give us plenty of time to rest a little bit before we had to go to baseball practice. Or a lot of times we'd have a game that evening. But the volume, so a lot of these logs that were coming in, they were, some of them 2+ feet diameter, anywhere from 10 to 16 foot in length. And we could go through, I'd be speculating now, but I would say a lot of times 2 or 3 of those semi-loads a day.
Holy mother.
So yeah, you would be going through, we were burning through the lumber.
So when you were in college, did you have a job while you were in college?
Yeah, so went to the University of Missouri in 1998, and the story behind that, I never actually, this happened and was still trying to figure out what I want to do. And I really thought, actually, even before this happened, I wanted to join the military. And I can remember talking to a Marine recruiter, and, I'd tell him this happened. And he's like, you're not going to get in the Marines. And I can remember even visiting with an Army recruiter, and they're like, we'll bring you in, but, you're probably going to be at a desk job. You're not going to be jumping out of a plane like Jared Holmes and some of these others. So I was like, well, I don't want to, like, if I join the military, I want to be a soldier. So that kind of erased that from happening. But I had an FFA teacher, Alan Harrell's his name. And, when I look back, one of the best mentors, teachers I ever had. But I can remember my junior year, him saying, have you thought about what you want to do after you graduate? And I was like, Mr. Harrell, I'll probably go and, work construction like everybody else. And nothing against that whatsoever. And he said, have you ever thought about college? And I was like, yeah, but I haven't really been, we work at the sawmill every night in summers, and I haven't really been taking the classes. And here's what he said. He said, hey, I want you to go up to the guidance office. He goes, get the application for the University of Missouri. And he goes, get every scholarship application you can. And he said, if you want one, I'll help you fill them out. But he goes, you'll get enough tuition or scholarships to pay for one semester of tuition. And he goes, go do that. He goes, just do this for me. Yep. If you don't like it after one semester, you're not out any money. You can come home and do whatever you want. And I was like, that doesn't sound like a bad deal. So I remember going up to the guidance office, getting the application, all these scholarships. I go home and I give them to my mom to fill out.
Yep.
So I was working at the sawmill, like, because you get in the evening, because that's even during school year, we would, a lot of times we'd go to the sawmill and we'd be working there till 8 o'clock at night with the lights on and stuff like that. But my mom, bless her heart, she filled out the application for me and all the scholarships. And here was a crazy thing when we did the scholarship awards ceremony, and I graduated from a big high school, actually small town, but it was a high school with a lot of small towns. So
fed it.
I think our graduating class was 300, but I was awarded more scholarships than any other kid in my class or student in my class. And I didn't have a high GPA, and I don't know where I was ranked, but it was kind of crazy. It was almost odd. I can remember going up and you kept getting these awards. I don't remember why. I mean, I was like,
kept looking at your mom going, yeah, I give her the wink.
Whatever you wrote, sign in there. So yeah, I went to the University of Missouri and studied agriculture there because I didn't know what else to study besides agriculture. It was agriculture education. And that was where, I was talking about coming from a farming community. And again, growing up, farm, sawmill, all that, I'm like, I don't want to be doing this. And quite frankly, like, the people I knew doing this were not making very much money. The farmers that I knew, they were hobby farming. They still had other jobs. Yep. But when I went to Columbia and I joined this fraternity, this ag fraternity, Alpha Gamma Sigma, I started talking to some of my fraternity brothers. And I was like, well, what do you guys do? Or, like, well, we're from so-and-so, Northwest Missouri. I was like, we farm. And I was like, okay, what else you guys do?
Yeah.
We farm. And I was like,
really?
Well, how do you guys pay the bills? We farm, I was like, really? So that kind of sparked, I was like, well, maybe some of these people do make money farming. Yeah. And again, coming from a small town in eastern Missouri, I didn't know these other farms in, northern Missouri and Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, some of these bigger ones. But that really kind of started opening my eyes that maybe there are opportunities in agriculture.
Yeah. So did you end up staying for 4 years then after your first semester?
So I did, yeah. So first semester, actually, I wasn't in the fraternity until the second semester, and that probably kept me there more than anything. Yeah. But I started meeting people, and I was like, yeah, I think I can do this. You asked about a job in college. That's what. So my very first semester, I had different. You had to take your mandatory classes, but one of the first ag classes I took was animal science. It was called Animal Science 65. But that's where you actually toured all the university farms. Yep. And so I can remember we went and visited the horse farm, the turkey farm, but we stopped at the sheep farm. And, you get a tour of the farm and the manager's talking. At the end of that tour, she said, hey, if anyone's looking for a part-time job, we have some openings here at the sheep research farm. So I never raised sheep in my life. And but I knew agriculture, but I was like, oh, this kind of sounds cool. So I applied and I got a job at the sheep research farm at the University of Missouri, and actually ended up liking it because I'll say this, for me, it was about 20 minutes south of the university. And it was kind of my outlet to leave and go be on the farm still during college.
It was a lot easier than working in a sawmill. Like, this isn't too bad.
No, it was a lot easier. I can remember because I remember there was like 200 or 300 sheep, and at that time the farm, they had a real bad case of foot rot. So we spent the majority of the time, we'd herd these sheep in, and we'd be trimming hooves and foot rot. We'd put them in these salt baths, but that was the core of the business with that.
You have some experience with some sheep. You guys could have some shared stories there.
Yeah.
Grandpa loved sheep. Well, why did he love sheep?
He loved sheep because he didn't like to mow around stuff. So we would just run a hot wire. And he's like, oh, yeah, we'll put the sheep out there.
Didn't he say, though, that every piece of ground serves a purpose?
That's right.
And
that's good.
And so all the places that you couldn't row crop and the corners, we would run sheep. And when we moved all the pigs inside this barn, we had the hay mow. And so we always had some sheep. We always have about 50 ewes and child labor to do all the things that needed to be done. And it was another excuse to bale hay. And, I will say that, they were fine, but it was a pretty happy day when I finally convinced him that, we should get rid of these sheep.
I was born on the tail end of that. I saw a little bit of it, but all I remember is just them sticking their head through the fence and getting stuck. Gosh, and they just sit there with their damn head stuck in the fence, and you're like, gosh.
everything was getting old. You know, I was working off farm, and so, you know, the fences weren't in the best repair, and I wasn't going to spend the time doing it. And my dad was the king of taking a 16-foot panel from Orscheln's and turning it into 12 small pieces that you put here and here, and
patch them up.
It finally just got to the point. It was like, all right, they got to go. But yeah. No sharp edges on a sheep, though, so it's good.
That's true.
Yeah, you're like, I'm safe here.
Yeah.
But,
sure.
All right, so what did you think? When you went to college, you reluctantly started with the idea that you were just going to kind of do what people you know do and go into construction, go into trades. You're in college. Like, what did you have an idea of where you were headed, what you wanted to do, what your interests were?
Still had no direction on agriculture. I still didn't think that was the field that I wanted to be in. But so that was 98. A lot of people remember 9/11, 01. Yeah. And it was probably even before that. But I started looking at like, you know, firefighting looks like a good career. And some of the firefighters, you know, I'd met, again, crazy noble job, but also these guys only work 10 days a month.
Yep.
Like, I could work 10 days a month. And for me, it wasn't about not working, but it was like I could do multiple things. Like I could work here, plus have another business or other side job. So through college, actually, I got my EMT license. It was my junior year. I started working for the ambulance in Columbia. It was Boone Hospital. And I was working part-time. So a lot of times I was working like special events. There was rodeos and, you know, they'd have to have an ambulance there or some kind of sports event. I worked a couple shifts, like night shifts, and saw some things that I can remember. My very first shift I ever worked was a suicide.
Oh,
and had to go on. It was DOA when I got there, but they still had to call the ambulance. But that was something that was just crazy. But yeah, so I thought I was going to do the EMS route, graduated from Mizzou, and I had applied at all these fire departments kind of in all these communities in central Missouri. So I applied right there in Columbia, Sedalia, Rolla, all these towns. And after 9/11, also there's a little movie called Backdraft came out, Kurt Russell, but like everybody wanted to be a firefighter. Yep. And so unless you knew somebody already in the department or knew somebody within the city or whatever, like you had to have some kind of connection. And so I was put on the waiting list. So I always passed the written and the physical exams. That wasn't a problem. So I'm sitting there waiting, like, what am I going to do? I graduated, and it was my summer of 2002. I started looking. I was like, I got to find another job. You know, I graduated. Actually, there was a little bit. I was almost depressed for a while because I graduated from Mizzou, have an ag degree. Yep. I don't have a job. I thought that this was going to be the path that I was going to go on, firefighting. Nobody's hiring me. So one day I'm looking in the local paper, still living there in Columbia, and there's a little ad in the paper for a delivery driver, Class A CDL, preferred. And I had my Class A CDL from the farm, and I'd worked some other jobs where I had acquired it. So I knew how to drive a truck and machinery from living on the farm. So I went and applied, and this company, Rue Materials, it was a sheetrock delivery company. So they were looking for delivery drivers to haul and stock sheetrock. Well, if you've ever messed with sheetrock, which I never did before then, yep. I didn't, it's a very manual, grueling, labor-intensive process. And so I remember going and applying for the job, and the manager, he looks at my resume, and he's like, "You just graduated college?" I was like, "Yep." He's like, "You want to stock sheetrock?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "Okay." So yeah, I started there. But I say this, I absolutely loved it. I wasn't dating, not married at the time. And this one, we would start at 6:30 in the morning. And you never knew what time you're going to get off, because like sometimes you'd get back to the yard at 2 or 3, and you'd have to go deliver sheetrock to another house. And again, you're delivering to the house, but you're also stocking it inside the house. So you're stocking it in the upstairs, the downstairs, basement. Some of these you never knew what was going to happen. So you might pull up to a job thinking it's going to take an hour. You might be there 3 hours. So you never knew what time you were going to be off. So there was a lot of times, it wasn't uncommon for us to work a 12-hour day.
Yeah.
So most times we were already on overtime by Wednesday. Yep. But for me, I loved it. I was wanting to make money. We were getting paid by the hour. We get paid for so much that we stocked. And I was already kind of used to it from working on the farm. So the hard work didn't scare me. No complaints. So I started doing that for 2 years. Within, I think, a year and a half, the manager, he kind of knew my background and got to know me. And he's like, "Man, would you want to come inside and do sales and dispatching inside?" And I was like, yeah, it sounds good to me. Well, before then, I never knew much about business, never looked at an income statement, a balance sheet, anything like that. But he brings me inside and starts showing me these, income statements and balance sheets and how to do inventory turns and all that. And actually I started it was kind of interesting. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. Well, he even started letting me bid on jobs and some of these bigger jobs. And I'll never forget, he started telling me, he's like, man, you really have an interest and it seems like you're really good at some of this stuff. And again, for me, I didn't know what he was talking about. I'm like, well, you're just asking me to do a job. I'm trying to do it. But one of the defining moments was, it wasn't my manager, but there was one of our customers. It was a builder in town in Columbia. One day he came in and we were talking, and he just said, Jared, he goes, I can't wait to see where you go in life. And I was like, for me, I was like, I appreciate that. Thank you. But it kind of stuck with me. Like, what was he talking about? Or why did he see something that was different or whatever? Yeah. And I say that to be like, it was just, it was something that I was like, well, maybe God's got another path for me, or maybe there's something more than this. So fast forward, I meet my wife in 2004. She's living in Kansas City. I'm still in Columbia. It's about 2 hour difference in drive. And we started getting serious. And I knew that I wanted to move out of Columbia and I wanted to be closer to her. So one day she was telling me, she's like, well, why don't we, this is 2004. She's like, why don't you update your resume and we'll put it out there on the web. So we update it. And actually, I'll say this. I think she updated it for me again.
Yeah, there's a pattern here. Smart women in your life helping, dragging you along. I think I can relate to this.
So she helped me fill it out. And back in that day, we posted it on careerbuilder.com.
Sure.
And so we put it out there, and I'm like, who's going to see this resume? Like, I don't have anything on there, have a, FFA and Mizzou and truck driving experience. And it was like 10 days later, I'm working on the job, hauling sheetrock, and phone rings, and this recruiter from Kansas City calls, and he's like, is this Jared Flynn? I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, this is Andy Traub with Bartlett Grain Company. And I was like, oh, hi, how's it going? And he's like, good. He's like, I'd like to talk to you. And he's like, I see you got some trucking experience and an ag background, and I'd like to know more. So I kind of explained. He's like, well, we'd like to have you come to Kansas City and interview with us. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, when can you be up here? And I was like, I can be up there this Friday. So I can remember, and I can remember going up there. There's a little bit to the story too. I remember when I graduated from college, my grandma and grandpa bought me my first suit. And my grandpa, I can remember him telling me, like, if you're going to go and interview for companies, you're going to have a nice suit to wear. I never owned a suit in my life. And so it was crazy. So this was the first time I got to wear that suit and went to go interview. And so it was Bartlett Grain Company. At that time, they were at the Kansas City Board of Trade building. They were up on the 6th floor, but I can remember going to the Kansas City Board of Trade. And this is, again, I'm small town kid, I'm in my mid-20s, but like going into the big city. And I can remember going up the stairwell and dressed up. I had a little folder and walk in the door and walking the entry. And again, I can remember it was red carpet and mahogany wood, just I'm like out of my element.
Yeah.
But I go and interview, and there was like 6 or 7 of these commodity traders that were heads of these departments. They sat back and asked me questions. And I remember that weekend I stayed there in Kansas City with my wife now, but that next week they call up and they're like, we'd like to have you come work for us. I was like, what am I going to do? And they're like, well, we're going to have you work in our transportation department. And I was like, okay. So I can't remember. It was after that, I'd put my 2 weeks in, moved to Kansas City. And at that time, and for people that know the grain business, and I never knew that. I mean, I grew up in ag, but at that time I got to work there. And the first week on the job, the vice president of the company, we had like this team meeting. I'm in there. They're making introductions, introducing me to all the people and shaking hands. And again, this is at that time, and I think they still today, like it was suit and tie. So everybody's shirt, tie, kind of that Wall Street feel. You could see future, prices up on the board and all that. But I remember we were in this little fishbowl conference room, and after the meeting, the vice president of the company, Jack Moran is his name, he comes up to me and he says, Jack goes, Jared, I just want you to remember one thing. He goes, we are a logistics company that moves grain.
Yep.
And I said, I thought we were a grain company that moves, and he's like, we're a logistics company that moves grain. I remember that. And so that was another thing that kind of sunk, like, what does he mean? Like, we got all these, terminals and grain operations and all this. But I started figuring out that how much the grain industry relies on transportation.
Yep.
I mean, everything from vessel, barge, rail, truck, but specifically the truck. I mean, how important and integral the truck piece is to the grain industry.
Yep.
So I just I was on this path of just learning everything I could about trucking and how it relates and all that. Well, they put me behind the wheat desk. I was reporting to the head of the commodity of the wheat desk, and the wheat out of all the commodities required the most trucking because wheat moves more. It can move more miles than most other commodities because of the price, and you can go into the details of that. Corn, soybeans, milo, some of that, it stays more local tributary. Yep. It can go into more local markets, but wheat can spread out a lot further. So that's where it required the most trucking, and that's what I started doing. I started calling truckers, discussing rates, and again, trying to figure out what a rate per bushel equated per mile or per ton, all the equations. And just for me, it was like this big puzzle to put together. But what was cool is I saw that at that time, Bartlett, I was doing it for the wheat desk, but nobody was doing it for the other commodities. And most of it, they were always buying it delivered in. So they let somebody else handle the wheels. Whatever co-op they'd buy it from or whatever trader, they'd buy it delivered to their facility. And I started looking at this and I was like, man, if we can own more of that picked up, we could probably do a better job of moving it, maybe even more efficiently, maybe get better pricing. And not only that, sometimes it just depends on the market moves. You can spread it. So I can remember going and sitting with each of these other commodity managers. I went and sat with the corn guy, corn manager, Mark was his name, and started talking about, hey, if you let me handle this, I think we can buy more and move more. And, people, the nature of the grain business, it's volume. The margins are razor thin, but it's moving more volume. So they started letting me move more of the corn loads. I went and talked to the soybean group. We started moving more of the soybean loads. Milo, we started doing that. I started helping with our feed grains division. They were, at that time, a lot of these ethanol plants were coming online. We were moving DDGs. I started working with the country elevator group, moving all the fertilizers. Within 6 months, they said, hey, we're going to move you into your own category. So now, instead of working in the wheat group, you're going to be head of truck transportation. I was like, oh, that sounds good. And then they brought another person in, Rachel is her name, that helped me manage that. But it was fun. It was so much fun because it was just like, you can tell I'm a fast pace. I can't sit still. Yeah. I have a hard time concentrating, but it was just like this cool thing, this project. And it was just so cool. It was, loved the team that I worked with. They were so supportive of me. I can always remember going to, we'd go to like the Christmas party, and the owner of the company, so there's Paul Bartlett was the chairman, but then his son, Jim Hebenstreet, and his wife, they were kind of the next heirs to take it over. But I can remember going to a Christmas party, and again, I'm still young, 20-something, and Jim, the president of the company, coming up and being like, man, Jared, I'm hearing awesome things about what you're doing. And I was like, oh, thanks. He's like, no, man, people are really talking about what you guys are doing and with the difference. So again, it was just this like, wow, there's something to like what we're doing with this. So that's just where I just saw the opportunity. It was just cool to be working at that and having that. But for me, it was within 3 or 4, I guess 5 years in, this little device called the iPhone came out in 2008. And that's where I started realizing, like, how can we use technology and digitize a lot of these manual processes? Because before that, and even still today, a lot of booking trucks and a lot of that process, it was all phone. I mean, it was any given day. When I remember working at Bartlett, I would be on the phone and usually have 2 or 3 lines parked, truckers, and I would get off that one and take another one. Our assistant, like, her job was just to park calls. Yep. So we could field them and book these loads. Cause we were booking 5,000-6,000 loads a week.
Yeah. And it was all done over the phone.
It was all done over the phone.
There was no this.
Yeah. Yep.
But you saw it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was other technologies out there, but it was just like, hey, how do we keep simplifying this process? And for me, the other thing I'll say this, I had a strong passion for the small truckers. And that's one thing I realized. I didn't know this until going to Bartlett. If you look at the trucking industry as a whole, most people that don't know, they think trucking, they think of Warner, Snyder, Swift, JB Hunt, and you can name all these megas. You see, the ones you see on the highway. If you total all those trucks up, those big mega trucking companies, they only represent 7% of the total freight that's out on the U.S. highways.
Isn't that
that
crazy?
that other 93% are 5 or less trucks.
Wow.
That make up the industry. And it's the small mom and pops, these owner operators. And that's where I'm working at Bartlett. I started realizing like those were the guys that I was dealing with. Those were the guys that I was booking these loads with. And quite frankly, I also realized like the industry as a whole had a bad perception of them at that time.
Yeah.
A lot of these, like, you know, it was common for someone, hey, find me a truck. And this, I was like, well, I can go hire someone. But it was just like, it was terms of like thinking of them as a commodity.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, no, I could, you know, talk to so-and-so and we can book this and have these, you know, better relationships. And,
ironically though,
What's that?
78% of the bad press goes to Swift. I mean, they're the number one target for every trucking meme on the internet is Swift. I don't know much.
But there was a
about it.
perception that, you know, my assistant, like a lot of people just like, and it infuriated me because they thought of truck drivers as dirt balls. Like there wasn't a good perception of them. I was like, no, a lot of these guys, they're you and me. They're the farmers up the road. They're the people that we know really well that are vital part of the supply chain. So how do we figure out how to really lift them up? And that was a strong passion I had. And again, I think it stemmed from, again, growing up in that small community. Like those people were my family members. They were my neighbors. And like, they weren't just, you know, something, you know. So that's where I just had a strong empathy and passion to try to help these smaller guys. How can we provide more tools and more technologies and just a better way for them to do business together?
So is that where BulkLoads stems from? That idea starts to kind of develop in your brain and you're like, man, there's something here. And then when did you take the jump?
Yeah. So I can remember I was on, my wife and we had our daughter in 2009 and we were on a little, I don't know if you call it a baby moon or a little break. We were going to go to Mexico and we're getting ready to lift out of Kansas City and we're flying up. I remember this so vividly, but I told her, I said, man, I have this idea in my heart and I don't know how to do this. I've never started a business before, but like, I think that this could be an opportunity out there. And what do you think? And she's like, I trust you. You know, if you want to do this, like you got to follow your dreams. So, yeah, it was, so that was 2000, I think it was 2009 or 10. BulkLoads, we officially launched it in 2011. Story is I'm a co-founder. So it was actually the BulkLoads. There was another, my partner, Matt, he had kind of built the prototype of it. And then when we came together, that's kind of what really launched BulkLoads in 2011. But the thing is, starting a new company, again, I'd built up, and again, I think this was just part of my journey. What was cool is I built up such a good relationship and network of a lot of these carriers and other people in the industry. So when we started, a lot of people knew who I was. It wasn't just some guy didn't know Adam from Eve, didn't know anything about trucking, didn't know anything about shipping. But not saying it was easy. I can go through the hardships. That was the whole story in itself. But that's really kind of what started BulkLoads in 2011.
It makes you really think though that God did have a plan for you, you know, like all that time in that one industry and moving up and learning all the new stuff and developing a better system and learning all those new connections, meeting all those people, you know, it just leads you down the path.
And I don't know if you can relate with this, Torque or Sawyer, but like for me, it was like I had this idea stirring in my heart and like I could not think about anything else. And like there was just like, if I didn't do this, if I didn't move forward, whether it succeeded or failed, like I was going to have regrets.
It's the itch.
And it's like, the itch can't ever go away. And like for me, I didn't want to be 5 years down the road and just have those regrets. But there's a willingness of like, are you willingness to sacrifice like everything else? Because at Bartlett, I had climbed the corporate ladder. I was up there with the guys, making a great living. I was
going to just ask you that. Was it hard to walk away?
Well, yeah, that's just like, I'm walking away from, a great life.
And security.
Security, yeah. Yep. But I can remember my wife, we were living in Kansas City and I wanted to move either closer to my family towards St. Louis, or closer to her family down in Springfield, where we are today, and we chose that. But we pack up, we moved down there, and that was in April, and so we start working on BulkLoads. But again, we're not making any revenue. Yep. My wife and I, and we had some savings and kind of calculated it out that, hey, how long can we live? Yep. And had my daughter too. So, that's the other thing too. You got a kid on the way, and, or we had our daughter, and then actually we got pregnant with we were having our son. But I can remember we had a basement room that we had our office in. And I remember going down there, and there was a moment where I think it was 3 or 4 months in, I was walking through the kitchen, and she's like, Jared, how's the business going? Are you guys making money yet? And for us, we were trying to still build up the infrastructure and get the development and all that ready. And so we didn't have a paywall yet, because we were a subscription service, a SaaS service. People pay us a monthly or annual subscription. Still none of that happening yet. But I can remember I'm walking in the kitchen, and she's just like, honey, I love you, but we're about out of money.
Yep.
And it was like a dagger to the heart, but it was just like a sense of pride. And like, I went downstairs and I started crying. And I was like, God, why did you bring me this far? Why did you bring me this far to fail? Why, like, if this wasn't what you called me to do, what am I supposed to do? So that was in July. August comes around, we flip the switch on, and it wasn't like just magic, but like, here comes our first day, we made $500. The next day, whatever. And the memberships kind of just started coming in. But it was like that defining moment where you're just like,
it's that meme. It's that when you're mining, there's a guy mining above and there's a guy mining below. And the guy that's mining below, he gets real close to gold, and then he turns away and he walks away. He said, I'm not going to find it. And then the other guy, he keeps going. And right when you're about to quit, right when it's the hardest, it happens.
It was, because it was just, I was rock bottom. I was just like, did I risk it all? Did I make a foolish move? Did my pride get in my way? Am I doing this for selfish reasons? Did I think that I was somebody that I wasn't?
Yeah. All those questions.
Seriously, like, because I'm nobody, but that's, so that's kind of where it kind of started churning. And 2011, by the end of it, we kind of started taking off.
There's so many people that are like that say that exact thing. Right when you're at that point, something happens.
Well, I think it's really interesting. So a point that you just kind of casually went, like, talk about a good woman.
Yeah.
So you have a baby, you have a little girl, and I don't know how far after that you take a little break. And you're on a plane flying, and you go, oh, yeah, by the way, honey, I want to quit my job. I want to start this deal. So that's a good woman right there that didn't just ask the stewardess for a pillow and just, how much life insurance do you have, Jared? All right, that'll be enough.
I married a God-fearing woman, and I thank God every day for her, because she is as stronger than I am, and just so determined. And after we got married, it was one of her goals to, she said, I'm going to support you whenever you do, and I'm always going to be there. And I think that's something that, man, you're so thankful to have that in life, to have a person that that's got your back when you're in times of need. So, and I think it's why God created man and woman and put us together. Like, it's the woman to support that man, and him to, and there's different roles that people serve in the household. But it was by his design.
Yeah. I'll just say that, I think it's one of the worst raps that there is, that, so when my wife and I got married, and I've said this before, she only had, this is a testimony to my salesmanship, because she only had like 3 prerequisites. She didn't want to marry somebody shorter than her, somebody with blonde hair, and she sure as hell wasn't going to marry a farmer. And I hit all 3 of those boxes and got her. I hooked that deal. But from the very beginning, she wanted a family, and she worked she worked our entire marriage, but she always was the one that was supporting. And when I started in the construction world, she had a way harder job than I had. To manage a family, I mean, I worked with a bunch of deadbeats, and I love those guys. And I've said it before, when I was working construction, I would have worked there for free just for the stories, because it was like going to recess, and you didn't have to think about anything. You know, you were building stuff. You could. It was great. And she was home raising my kids, figuring out how we were going to buy groceries. She was the one that was calling me when the car died somewhere and I couldn't get there, and she had to figure it out. And people give women who raise a family a bad rap. That's a hell of a lot harder job than what I was doing. What I was doing, yeah, I mean, it made money, but it was a way simpler task. And I tell both my boys, you know, it's like I missed out on a lot of the good stuff with them because I was on the road doing what I was doing. But, you know, never think that your mom had it easy, because that job and it's the most important job. I mean,
Amen.
People are like, oh, you've raised such good boys. Well, I kind of did. I wrote a lot of checks to help, but she's the one that raised them. I mean, till the end, till I got to where I had more time. So anyway, I digress a little bit, but I just thought
that's definitely the culture. I mean, you're seeing it come back a little bit with the trad wife and all that. Like, that's the trend of being a traditional wife and coming back and raising a family, and it's kind of going back the other way. But in the culture we have today, it's looked down upon, unfortunately,
and you can accomplish so much more under that form.
Well, and I feel like you can instill a lot more. You yourself as a family unit can instill more into your kids than the system. Yeah. Because when you're both gone and you're not there, and you're just, school's telling them what they want, government's telling them what they want, everything's telling them how they should live and what their moral compass is, and you can't. Yeah. You can't, because you don't have the time.
You're talking about your wife, not wanting to marry somebody this. So my wife, she said, like, one of her rules was she was never going to marry a farm guy that drove a big 4x4 pickup. When we met, I had a big black big black diesel pickup. That was the thing. Yeah. Actually, when I worked at Bartlett, like the first day I drove that, it couldn't fit in the parking garage. So they actually had to get me a spot outside because my truck was too high to fit in the parking garage. But yeah, that was one of her covenants, that she was never going to marry a farm kid that drove a big jacked up 4x4.
That's awesome. Well, so what does BulkLoads do today? Like, if you had to bring it down to you kind of were explaining it a little bit, but if you had to simplify it, what's your guys' bread and butter, and how do you service people? Yeah,
so the core business BulkLoads, we were started as a marketplace to connect trucking companies with shipping companies and brokerages, specifically bulk commodities. So and we're big in ag, but we also do non-ag. So what happens is a shipping company like Bartlett or ADM or Cargill or Co-op, they will pay a subscription and they will post loads that they have available. So whether it's corn loads from A to B, you're going to a feedlot, ethanol plant, or whatever, then we have a community of trucking companies. They pay a subscription to get on there and they can see those loads. The cool thing is we match make those loads, but our goal is that we hopefully help these guys build relationships, because once you find a connection in there, we've talked to guys all the time. They're like, hey, I found this guy, and now I'm doing 80% of my work through him. So that's part of it. Some guys, most trucking companies, especially in bulk, they have dedicated routes that they run. But if you know anything about trucking, things drop off or whatever. So they need fill-in business. So a lot of guys use it as fill-in business. Some guy might take a random load out to Flagstaff, Arizona, but he's got to find a load back. That's where he uses it to fill in the gap. So that's where BulkLoads started, was the marketplace to really connect those companies that wouldn't be able to find each other anywhere else online. Through over the years, though, we've now kind of branched off. We're kind of 5 different companies, but we started looking at some of these other issues that a lot of these small truckers were facing. So after we started BulkLoads in 2014, we saw another big problem was trucking companies have a hard time getting paid. If you look at, I don't want to pick on ADM, sometimes their payments are different, but like ADM on average, I think they pay 40 days, net 40 days. So that trucker hauls this load today. It's going to be 40 days till he gets a check in the mail. We were talking about this earlier. Razor thin margins. Trucking, most of these guys run at like a 95 operating ratio. So that means for every $1 they spend, they're making, it's 5 cents. So it costs them 95 cents for every $1 they make.
Yeah.
I'm rephrasing that the right way. So that guy's got that much money already wrapped up in that load in fuel, insurance, maintenance. I mean, you go through all the costs of a truck, and these guys listen to the show are going to know all of that very, very well. They can't, I mean, if they're waiting that long to get paid, I mean, that's a lot of time and money plus interest costs and all that. 2014, we started a company called Smart Freight Funding. So we essentially quick pay these guys. So we, instead of those guys waiting 40 days, we basically can pay them next day. We charge a small percentage, to do that. So it's usually like 2 or 3% of the freight bill. We started that. We use BulkLoads as our main marketing tool to do that. So any given day we're processing, thousands of freight tickets. So that was in 2014. In 2019, we started a TMS program. And if people don't know what that is, TMS stands for Transportation Management System. So what we realized as BulkLoads was growing, we're helping these guys find loads. We're helping these guys get paid. So now these guys with 1 or 2 trucks, they were growing to 10, 15, 20 trucks. Well, as you get more trucks, you got to have a system or technology to manage all that. So you're managing the ticket flow, the tracking, the dispatch. That's what TMS is. So it's another software that we sell so these guys can kind of really manage their whole business, their whole ecosystem in one platform.
I'll bet you that has probably grown. That grow faster than you thought it would?
It's been both ways. So it has, but the thing is, trucking companies sometimes are reluctant
to rely
to use technology, and sometimes it's hard to switch. If somebody's been doing, the same thing over and over. Hey, if I've had Betty in the back office always doing all my tickets forever, she handles this or whatever. I don't want to change this or that. So a lot of it's just a shift to say, hey, you can be much more efficient. Now I say this, some of the companies that we've had switch, they're like, oh my gosh, it used to take me 30 something hours a week to do all of my bill pay and pay truckers. Now it only takes me 3 hours through this system. So that was another big tool that we launched. In 2021, we launched our own insurance agency. So now we can write truck insurance. So, and we can do all the different lines, but cargo and liability are the 2 ones that we do. So all these truckers are running, just like you and I have to have insurance on our vehicles. Every trucker has to have commercial insurance. So that's the one that we released 3 years ago, and that one's grown. And then last but not least, we have another company called Bulk Permitting. So any companies out there that want to get started in trucking, we can help them get their DOT, their authority, IFTAs, all the back-end compliance stuff. What happens is, and a good example, you might have a farmer that he's got a hopper trailer, but he has to get commercially licensed to be in business, and he can go online and do it, but he can call us and we can get him set up. We know everything to do. So it's a one-stop shop. So we can do that. Or you have company drivers. Some guy might be driving for, whatever fleet for years, but he wants to go out and do the American dream and get his own operating authority. We can do all that through bulk permitting. So that's kind of our ecosystem of companies that make up BulkLoads.
Sounds like you just looked around and found everybody's pain and like, this is a pain. We need to solve this.
Yep.
This is a pain. That's what it comes down to. Like what you were talking about with that, with the second company that you talked about.
Smart Freight.
Yeah. It's like, I think one of the whatever business you're in, the hardest transition or the hardest step is kind of that first one when you go from, in the example you are, like you're the guy and you got the truck and you put another truck on the road and it's your brother-in-law. We'll say it's your brother-in-law or it's whoever. And you can count on that person. And so you run it. But when you make that step that you start hiring those employees, you are no longer just the guy that's responsible for yourself. And you're a manager. And there's a lot of people that have this dream of building a company, but it's not very romantic when you become the manager.
That's right.
And that level of pain, when you're in that office instead of in that truck and you're dealing with stuff that you hate, that business that you wanted to have, you're like, well, what the hell? Why am I here? And I was at FarmCon in Kansas City, and Van Trump, Kevin Van Trump, I think that's his name, that puts that on. Probably the best thing I got out of that whole deal. There was a lot of good stuff, I think, but he put up a quote and he said, "Don't let the opportunity oh gosh, I had it written down in my, don't let the thing that you prayed for become the thing that you complain about."
Oh yeah, I've heard that before. That's really good.
Because that is so true, because so many businesses, you're like, if we can just get to here, and then you get there, but now then you're having to do the thing that you least want to do. Yep. And that's where, like what you're talking about, you find that pain, and if you can delegate that pain, man, that's what helps you get to that next level.
Well, not all, but most of the people we deal with, these owner operators, most of them got into the business because they enjoy driving the truck.
Yep.
But they want to have their name on the side, and they want to run the truck. I wouldn't say all of them, but most of them, they never ran a business. There's some of the back end. And again, I've learned all this by hand, but most of them, they don't want to deal with all that back end stuff. Mm-hmm. I've told you about, like, my mom, my wife helped me out. Like, I don't like dealing with that back end stuff. So we figured out, like, hey, a lot of these people are like you and I. Let's find ways that we can automate and, let somebody else handle that, and let these guys focus on what they love doing, you know? So it's a win-win the way we look at it.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely. I mean, the best businesses are businesses that solve problems for people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're right on there. Okay. So the way you and I met was you reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I didn't know anything about your core business, but you started a podcast.
Yep.
So what was the inspiration for that? Because you talk about a niche, you're in a niche business, and then you took that and you really got a niche podcast for sure.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration for that?
So we started the podcast in 2018, and before that, I started looking, and podcasts were really kind of starting to take off. I mean, today, and no offense to anyone, man, everybody's got a podcast. But back then, it was still unique if somebody had a podcast. But one thing we realized, our clients have more time to do than anything, these drivers, is listen going down the road. So we thought, why not be a voice out there, and especially a voice that can help these people, give them inspiration, encouragement, let them know what we can offer, and really just kind of be there's a saying that we have, like, be a lighthouse out there. You got all these people, you think of a lighthouse, they got all these ships trying to find the light. Like, let's be a lighthouse out there that can really help these companies succeed. So that was really the inspiration behind starting the podcast. We started that 2018. We release an episode every week. We've made it happen every time. Yep. So, I mean, I forget how many episodes in. 2 years ago, we started doing video. So we started adding our YouTube channel, and we talked about this before the show. That's where we're really seeing it take off. But for us, we just really think that, again, as society changes and the way people consume media, like, we can do a much better job through doing a podcast and content marketing than paying for a Facebook ad or a Google ad, for someone to hopefully click and then come to our website. So that's really been it. And we said this earlier, like, we grew up on the farm. Our handshake's just as good as our word. And how do we do that in a way where people can see who we really are as a company? And again, we're not perfect by any means, but I grew up in the country. I've driven a truck. I know those pain points, and how do we show people that we know what those pain points are and we can help solve those problems?
Yeah. It means a lot more. That's the thing. When you look at a Facebook ad, it doesn't do shit for you most of the time when you see it. But when you listen to a podcast and connect with the content, that's where it's not just about how many people you get to see the video. It's how many people you make a a real connection with that are going to go to BulkLoads and say, oh man, I really like what this guy's about. And that's what it's about.
The thing is, people want to do business with people who they trust and they can relate with. It was just crazy. Last week I was on a customer trip and we were talking insurance, and this customer was like, this one agent come out to my house and this guy pulled up in a Range Rover. Yeah. He pulled up in a Range Rover, and then he had his hair slicked back and all that. Yep. And again, I didn't think about he already knew that there was a trust factor by the way this person, and I have nothing against Range Rovers and slick back hair, but he didn't look and feel like the people that they deal with. And in our good old boy industry, people want to know that they're dealing with people they can trust.
100%.
That just an off while I thought of it, because I didn't want to forget this. So our country today is pretty fractured, pretty split. In your community, in the trucking world, is there that same level of fracture as far as point of view, or do you feel like truckers are a lot closer in their way they view things? I'm just curious. I'm not going to try not to get you in trouble.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to think of ways to say it's better. I'm just trying to think, in our community, again, we're very close to agriculture. So a lot of these guys are deep rooted. So a lot of them conservatives, small businesses. So a lot of these people, that's what they want to see. They want to see, ways to bring really favoritism back to small town America.
Yeah.
And I think, again, we deal with people from all over the country, which is awesome. So we're not dealing with Midwest guys. I mean, we have customers in the Northeast, the Southeast, West Coast. We even have a big, memberships and customers up in Canada. But I think that there's just this drawn to people want kind of there's a little bit, people want the 1950s back.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think we're all that way. I mean, I think we all have a tendency to look back and think that things were simpler, even if they really weren't. But it's funny you say that about small town, because that's a really popular theme in people within agriculture. The consolidation that we've seen, it does really hurt these small communities, because the guy, when you had 40 people that were all buying tires, they might buy tires from 3 different people. But when you have 5 people that are buying tires, they might all buy them from one spot, or they're not even buying them local. They're buying them wherever, and it's just it's death by 1,000 cuts in a lot of these communities. And no, a Dollar General is not economic development on a small town, because none of that money stays in your small town. I always just laugh at little communities that are happy that they're getting a Dollar General, because you're just speeding up the process of extracting that much more money from your little community. But
you see it in corporate farming, but in trucking too, some of these rules and regulations that are unfavorable to the small owner operator, hours of service. Now, I do believe that you have to be safe on the road, and there's a certain amount of hours. But again, why is it up to the government to judge how many hours somebody can drive?
Right.
And that can be debated all along. But there's times, when COVID happened, they lifted those rules. Mm-hmm. There was less accidents on the road.
Yeah.
So there's something to say, if you let people do the business like they know how to do business.
Yeah.
And so that's why you see more of that stuff. And, the big megas out there, they have lobbyists in Washington that are pushing big agendas that really favor megas that push out the small owner operators. So that's the other thing too that we look at, how do we keep empowering the small owner operators, small town America guys, to give them legs to stand on.
And you said 7% is the mega trucking of all trucking in America. Mm-hmm. That's crazy to me. I would have never guessed that. I thought it would have been the complete opposite.
Yeah, you can do the stats. And if you look at, because all of it's public data. You can get on the FMCSA website. But the majority of companies, if you look at trucking across the board, it's the small 5 or less trucks. Yep.
Do you know any other facts that people might not know about trucking overall that just they'd be interested to hear? Because it's such an industry that doesn't get talked about enough. That's the backbone of America.
Literally.
And people drive by semis every single day. but don't think anything of it.
Yeah, one thing as it pertains specifically to the grain industry, and this is what I learned at Bartlett. So if you look at transportation in general, transportation loves commodities. So vessels love to haul commodities. Railroads love to haul commodities. Barges love to haul. So what that does, though, it almost puts more of a squeeze on trucking. Because if you think about this, a railroad, they don't want to be hauling, they'll haul cars, but railroads, they would rather haul corn than cars, because corn, they can load it fast, they can move it down the tracks fast, they can unload it fast, versus cars and lumber and all this other stuff that take time to load and unload. Yeah. So it keeps the rails literally moving all the time. So what that does for trucking, though, it keeps it more localized. So a lot of times, if you're looking at corn, soybeans, stuff like that moving, there's usually going to be a rail loader within 100 or 200 miles, unless it's another outlet that it's going to move to. You're not going to see corn move out of here, Washington, Iowa, going to Dalhart, Texas. There's rail lines that can move that more efficiently. So that's one thing. People just sometimes they're like, I don't understand why we can't move hopper stuff from here to here. Now there is hopper freight and bulk stuff that does move coast to coast when you deal with like specialties like organics, pet foods, some of those bulk commodities. But if you're looking at the raw grains, there's a reason why it all kind of stays local. So what that does, it puts local pressure on the trucking. And because of that, sometimes it can get almost razor thin or too much competition. And that's why sometimes you hear, because, I've heard it all. People talk about, hoppers being welfare wagons and da-da-da-da-da. But it gets to be so much pressure locally. The other thing too, some of these truckers, if you can be home every night, and a lot of people want to be home, I don't blame them. Well, then you're going to be more competitive to haul local freight. So you're going to drive those costs that much lower versus a truck that's going to haul something over the road and make more overall. So that's something it's always a perception. People don't understand, like, well, why are the rates so much lower here? It's like, well, it's not necessarily, it's not the big bad shipping company or broker that's beating up the carrier. Now, sometimes that does happen. I don't want to say that doesn't happen, but a lot of times it's those market forces that drive those rates so low. Here's one thing I'd love to just share. One thing I've really learned over the past couple of years, I've talked about kind of our flywheel. We've started doing videos on our podcast or on our YouTube channel, going out and filming these companies. So we do a day in the life, and it's kind of a vlog style. And we go out and highlight these companies. And it's been so rewarding. Number one, because they're clients of ours, so I get to go meet these guys face to face. But I started looking and studying, like, how are these guys successful? How are these guys, because they all started with one truck. Yep. Everybody started with one truck. But we're dealing with companies there was one up in Minnesota, Fultz Trucking. They run close to 200 trucks and own 1,200 hopper trailers. Probably the largest hopper company in the United States or even North America. But I started studying, like, what separates these guys and made them different than these, the ones that are struggling. Because again, we hear it all. And again, we want to listen to these small guys that are struggling, not making it. They're going out of business. And why are the guys going out of business versus the guys that are succeeding? The one thing that I've realized that these companies, the big characteristics is these guys aren't focused on doing just one thing. The guys that I see that are being real successful in trucking is they look at these other opportunities and they find these other niches. Just for example, some of these hopper companies, they went out and built their own washout facility. Especially today when you got pet food and human different regulations, most of these hopper trailers, they have to have a certified washout before they can go reload. And these guys are going all over the place. So these guys have got to find washouts, and sometimes washouts, it can be a couple $100. Mm-hmm. Well, why not build a washout bay? Because you're going to have to use it yourself, but then hire other companies out to do. Yeah. So that's just one example. Other companies have realized, like, they've built landscape and supply yards. So, say that they're hauling product one direction, they'll go ahead and buy some kind of landscape rock. They got the equipment, they'll buy it, bring it up, and then they sell it in the springtime. So it's another diversified business. So they're actually selling that commodity, so it helps kind of offset the trucking business. And I can kind of keep going down the list, but you just find, they're renting trailers out. But I think that's where I'm always trying to educate and push people, like, hey, I know not everybody wants to grow. I get that. Not everybody wants to get to so many trucks or trailers, but if you're wanting to survive, just like farmers have had done over the time, man, look at all these other little opportunities that you can do to bolt on. So you're kind of hedging, because again, the thing is, just like farmers can't control crop prices, these truckers really can't control freight rates. Now you're going to get a lot of slack if you put this on a short, because people will say, but like, again, the freight rates, they go up and down. There's just market forces on there. And again, one thing you can do though, you can manage your costs and you can diversify, figure out these other opportunities. So that's one thing I want to share. Like, and if you watch our videos, we showcase those a lot, and it's been so cool to see like, hey, the opportunity's out there for everybody.
Yep.
You just got to figure out these other avenues to go to make those opportunities work. So that's what's really exciting. Sometimes when I first got into the business, I just think like, it's just the natural current. You're going to get so many people flush out, and that does happen. But it's like, man, if we can curve that, if we can just stop that a little bit, if we could help someone and figure out how they can be more successful, whether it's our services or diversifying their businesses, giving them other strategies, techniques, and we've done our job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was just sitting here thinking, along your journey, you took the jump from going from corporate America, working the ladder, being really successful at that, to starting your own thing. And what are you happy with the decision you made? First question. And is it better on this side, or was it, what are the things you like about this side? What are the things you liked about that side? Because I think a lot of people glamorize entrepreneurship today.
Yeah.
And they make it seem like it's just freedom and time, and you got so much time, and you got all this stuff. It's just you got to go this route, but they don't always see the other side of it. So I know that's a loaded question, but
yeah, I can bounce so many different directions on this. One thing I realized, I'll go back to the, interviewing some of these most successful companies. There was a company, especially it was out in Idaho, but we were sitting one night. He invited us to his house, and we had dinner with his wife, and we're talking about. Some of these people that are whatever going, you watch them on social media, and they're doing all this other stuff. They're playing video games, blah, 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 but he's just like, but he goes, Jared, I don't understand how people have so much free time. He's like, I got like this going on. And he wasn't saying to be negative, but he was just like, he's like, I don't understand. Like, some of these people, they work, 40 hours a week. He goes, I'm usually at 70 to 80 a week. And he wasn't saying to brag. He was just like, this is what I enjoy doing. He goes, sometimes I'm not done till 10, 11 o'clock at night. And sometimes I'm working on Saturdays and Sundays. But he's built that, and that's his company. I mean, that's his company. That's what he wants to do. So I'll say this. I think there's so many times I'll be like, why am I doing this? Or why did I get myself into this? Or why am I punishing myself? Because again, I'll have a new idea. We get something going, but that requires more attention and time. So it's got its ups and downs. But I think at the end of the day, I never talk about myself as an entrepreneur. And I think entrepreneur, it's now overused online, and people talking about entrepreneur. When I tell people this, it's like, seriously, like, and this is not going to sound sexy, I promise you. Like, stop calling yourself an entrepreneur and figure out a way to solve someone's problems. If you figure out a way to solve someone's problems, you'll find a way to be financially successful. Too many people are thinking about, well, I just want to start a business, or I just want to be, I want to be a business owner. And again, I think that's a cool goal, but like, let's think of it the other way. Like, be on a mission to be like, what can I do to make somebody's life better? How can I solve their needs? What are their processes in business? If you do that, you will be successful. And for me, that's where my brain all day long, I just look at opportunities. If I see something wrong, it's like, man, there's got to be a better way to do that. Yet last night we were talking about an ice cream venue back home, and this ice cream venue, everybody rants and raves. I'm not a fan of it because, number one, you go to get an ice cream, it's like $8. And it's like, I know dang well that ice cream maybe costs like 50 cents. Why am I getting, so if I take my family of 5 there, it's like $40 something. Yep. There's another ice cream place I can go that's, under $10. But I'm like, if somebody needs to have an idea, create that same ice cream, because it's a custard place, put double lines, the Chick-fil-A approach on it, charge half the price, and you'll be doing 4 times the business. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking. So that's, I guess I'm constantly thinking of ways, how can we be more efficient? How can you have it? What ideas out there that you can make better than the next person? Mm-hmm. So that's what excites me. So yeah, to answer your question in a nutshell, it's like, I think I have no regrets. And I think for me, there's always that internal itch, mm-hmm. What's the next move? I love I love what we as an organization have built, and all these companies I've mentioned before. It hasn't been me by myself. It's been other partners, other owners that have been. I've kind of had some of the ideas and kind of sparked that, but they're the ones that have got it across the line. I love creating that. I don't do well in the day-to-day. You were mentioning earlier about managing people and all that. Love my employees and all that, but like for me, it's like, for me, the heart of me is like, I guess what gets me juiced up is really out there figuring out that next idea, getting people excited, like, hey, what's this next thing we can do, this next thing we can build. If you can put me over there more, I think that's where I'll thrive or want to thrive.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I think we're both the same way.
Yeah, that's the problem.
But I mean, I feel like that is, I know you like don't call yourself an entrepreneur, but like that is the spirit of entrepreneur. I mean, you are solving problems, looking for problem solve, investing in people, building people up, getting them excited about where we're heading.
Yep.
And you have everybody else trying to help you achieve it. So
one thing I've realized at my point in life, one of the biggest things I can do internally but externally, but talk about the mission that we're on. The mission, we have a saying in our organization, we're here to take people from poverty to prosperity. Now I know people aren't legitimately in poverty, but like, how do we take these small businesses and make them prosper? And how do we keep thinking about that? And I think for us, as an organization, if we always have that underlying thought of servanthood, how do we serve people and make them better, we will always have a business. I think for me, most businesses you look at, and it's like when you have internal battles and and again, we're all guilty of this, we internal think, but like, how do you keep that mindset? Like, dude, we're mission focused. I've read these, last several years, I've read so many of these books on Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and all those guys, but his name's like, if you really look, the underlying thread, those guys were just crazy mission focused, and they made mistakes and, there's a lot of that, but like at the heart of it, they knew that their mission was to do X, Y, Z. And that's where I kind of see like we have to be mission focused all the time.
Mm-hmm. Where do you feel like you learn the most? I know by doing's probably your number one, but you mentioned you read books, you read some are those autobiographies or biographies from some of the greatest entrepreneurs. Like, where do you get information to get better? And just,
I should clarify, I don't read books. I listen to books. I have a little thing called ADHD that I have a hard time focusing reading, but I try to consume books as much as possible through Audible. But, I think ever since I started, when I worked at Bartlett, I was always on a search to, hey, how do I better myself? I mean, I went and got my MBA. It was from 2006 to 2008, but wanted to really I'm always on a quest to learn more. A couple of things recently, though, we've had a couple strategic coaches that we've hired. So really, BulkLoads, even over the last 5 years, we went from, we've almost quadrupled in size in a small amount of time. But I think of that was looking at these opportunities, but really finding a coach or consultant to say, hey, if you want to get to here, here's a roadmap. So we've hired coaches that have come in and really laid out a business plan, and it's required like multiple hours, deep session thinking of like, how are we going to put all this to paper, which I highly recommend to people if you're trying to look to grow. Like, you have to, it can't just be up here all the time. It's got to be on paper. But those same coaches I mentioned, a lot of them always have different books and stuff that they say, hey, you need to read this, you need to read that. I geek out on especially business books. Somebody told me one time, like, you need to try to read thrillers or mysteries and I have no desire, but I bounce back and forth. I try to read, a Christian book and then a business book and a Christian book and a business book. And that's kind of my rhythm.
Yeah. You mentioned ADHD. Are you diagnosed with ADHD, or do you just feel like
self-diagnosed?
Yeah. I feel like you could be self-diagnosed, but
I think I could be totally diagnosed.
I talk about that.
Not to go have anybody diagnosed.
I mentioned that because I feel like I'm hearing this more and more just in, I don't know, the business community. It's where I follow a lot of people on social media, but they almost say people with ADHD, it can be a superpower. It can be a superpower. And like they have ADHD, and it almost works to their advantage because they're always working on the next thing and improving it and thinking about those things. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about it because I feel like they want to suppress that, They want to get you on Adderall or Vyvanse really early on in the classroom and just shut you down and not be a disruption. But I don't know. I don't feel like might be the way.
So I would say, self-diagnosed, but I've been told several times, ironically, my wife and I were just talking this morning, and we were talking about our 3 kids, but my daughter, she was helping her with an assignment, but my daughter has a really hard time sitting still and like focusing. And my wife said, like, last night we were trying to get this assignment, I'm trying to help her, and my daughter literally got up and was like, Mom, I can't sit and look at this for this long of a period of time. And so I was like, yeah, I'm sure there's a little genetic from dad that probably, and that, but yeah, I think I would just think there was another time I was taking a test, and it was some kind of assessment test and blah, blah, blah. But after I got done, this consultant that was helping us looked at it, and he's like, have you ever been diagnosed for ADHD? He goes like, and I was like, no. He's like, well, a lot of these answers, the way this is trending, it looks like you're borderline. So I say all that. I joke with it. It's a serious, I mean, whatever it is, I don't want to call it a disease. I mean, it's however you deal with it, but I think it's who I am. So for me, I've really tried to embrace it and tried to say that I'm not, I mean, I am who I am. And if I can't sit down and actually read a book, I'm going to try to still consume it, audibly. And if I can't do this, I'm going to just figure out ways to cope with it. And, I think, for me, I just try to focus on how do I use it as a strength and not a weakness.
Yeah. It's a lot of perspective on how you look at anything, because way back, probably, I don't know, maybe 2005, maybe. The first time I ever took one of these, we had a coach come in when I was selling buildings, and the guy that I worked for, he wasn't real sold on any of that, because, he didn't need any help in any area. Let's just put it that way. And I mean, it worked for him, but he was a different generation. But we had a company come in, and we all took these evaluations, and then you met one-on-one with him. And I thought it was kind of hocus pocus, but that guy said to me, he got very specific, and he said, he's like, if I had to guess, if you were going to bid a hog building, and you say you had to drive 2.5 hours, and you got 15 minutes away, and you realized that you brought the wrong proposal and the wrong print, you would still go ahead and meet with the person and figure that you could still sell it. And I just looked at him, and I said, well, I did that like 2 weeks ago. And he was, his point, it was kind of a like, you need help. And I was looking at it like a badge of honor. I was like, yeah, I'm that damn good, which probably not the way to look at it, but it is just perception. And you have to find a way. There's some things about yourself that you can definitely better. And I'm all about, doing better and learning and, becoming a better version of myself. But then there's also things about your personality and things about just what's ingrained in you that, in my mind, there's no use of trying to swim against the current. Mm-hmm. You just need to figure out how to maybe bend that to the purpose that you're trying to do. And yeah, I think we're both probably that way. I mean, normal people wouldn't start one thing and then be like, oh yeah, well, we should do this too. And then like, well, that's a good idea. We should do that too. Like, most people would just do one thing and stay in their lane. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I look at that. I have friends that have a business, and I mean, they're very successful at it, and they're great at it. And I look at that and I'm like, man, that'd be kind of nice to just, have one thing and just go instead of just, run around with your acorns going, well, where am I going to bury this one? So
you've been like that your whole life, though. I mean, like, growing up, even with projects around the house, well, we're going to do the retaining wall, and then we're going to go out here and do the farm, and then we're going to go here and build a deck, and it's just like you've always been that way.
And then Trisha would say, "Are you?
Can
ever
you
gonna put the
finish
trim?
one of these?
Are we ever going to have baseboard in this house? Oh yeah, I'll get to it.
Yeah.
I'll get to it. But so,
Yeah, I
anyway.
think for at the end, if it's the idea is like, I don't know, there's something every day I think there's something I have to produce, something to create. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you can relate with that, Torque, but that's just always that feeling of every day. I don't feel fulfilled if I don't have that new idea that just came to mind or this new process or something new that I'm working on. But it's crazy. Like my wife, we were, again, talking this morning, and my oldest son is kind of similar. He finds a new idea. And then she was telling me that, now he's building, we have this, bearded dragon at home, and my oldest son is really big into Legos, but he's creating this contraption that it puts the cricket on a chute, and it's all automated, that feeds the bearded dragon the cricket. But he's been working on this, but he's been just focused on it, and it was something new. And but every week he's got some new project that he's building or creating. Yep. So I look at him I think it's not a bad thing.
No,
it's
he's
not
always.
definitely
But I do have to get on because I get home, and then the basement, our workshop, he's got stuff everywhere, and I'm like, man, did you have to get all my tools out, and I got to clean all this stuff up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have a hard time being present? Do you feel like when you're like that? Because I feel like that's really that's a struggle for me, because I'm kind of in the same way where always, like when I go to an ice cream shop, just like you, like when I walked into Five Guys for the first time, and you're like, God, this burger's expensive. But then you look around and you're just like, the way that this restaurant is set up and the way that they have things, no wonder they demand a premium. And that's where my head goes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But it's always hard to sometimes just lay your feet down and really be in the moment and be present. Is that something that you struggle with? Do you have anything that helps you with that?
100% agree. Yeah, I don't. I would just say, I'm one of those, I'm not a napper, weekends, and I have some rules, and this is going to offend a lot of people, but the TV should not be on during daylight hours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The TV, there's no reason to be sitting at home watching a movie in daylight hours. Now, sun's down and you want to watch a movie, but for me, it's just a rule in our house. And we'll make exceptions if it's a playoff football game and, home team and all that. But dude, if you got a movie on during the day, you are wasting the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I kind of come and play. For us on the weekends, there's no sitting around, and I probably need to do a better job. Well, I do need to do a better job of practicing Sabbath on Sundays. But for me, it's just really hard for me to just sit around. I feel like I have to get something accomplished and something done. And this work on the farm, you got probably 10 projects you're thinking right now. And then especially weekend hits, it's out of these 10, what realistically can I get done?
Yeah.
And what's it going to take and how many hours? And if I start this, am I going to be able to get it done?
Yep.
If I leave it out, then I got to get the tools out. I mean, it can compound. You go through the whole thing. So
Have you ever sat down and had a meal with your family, and there's something rolling as you come to the dinner, and you sit down and all of a sudden you realize, because if I'm thinking about something and I'm eating, I'm a power eater. I don't even think about the food, and I'm just eating. I'm just eating. And Trisha will nudge me, and she'll go, "What are you thinking about?" And you look down, and your plate is practically gone. And then you look at her plate, and she's eaten a quarter of it, and you go, "Oh, whatever." That's one of my worst. I can't, because you can't hide it. She'll be like, "Can you just be present for 5 minutes? And I guess just sit here till I'm done or whatever." And you're like, "Oh man," because the wheel just keeps going.
it does. My wife, she'll eventually, she's like, "All right, I can tell something's on your mind. What is it? Tell me what it is." And it's like, "Well, I'd like to buy a new skid loader." Or, "I think I'd like to buy this farm behind our house," or "I'm thinking about this," and but yeah, all the time. And I think, it's crazy how you don't even realize you're in that motion, and then all of a sudden they're kind of
snap out of it.
"Yeah, hey,
Yep, we're all here.
we're all here. What are you thinking?" Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's next? What is like what are you working towards that is your goal?
Yeah, so a couple of ambitions. Within the companies, we're still looking at solving those needs for our clients. And we still see, we call it the load life cycle. So, from the beginning to the end and every process in between. Some other avenues we're looking at, we know that still truckers, they have problems with financing, getting equipment, trucks financed. So how can we play a role in that? And we haven't put that together, but I think that's another one. We're already handling the freight bills. So how do we kind of match that up and really help them with the cash flow? Because again, if you really look at this, like we're now handling so much where really you just kind of keep flipping on these other switches and it's just less that they have to maintain. And they don't even, they can see it all happening, but it's all automated on the backside. So that's another piece of it that we're looking at. I think for me, professionally too, how can I have a bigger impact on agriculture and trucking in America? So I've contemplated public service a little bit, like Department of Agriculture. Those are some things. Now I haven't, besides just meeting people, but I think I look at it and I never would have thought about that in my younger years, but I look at this country and how much I love it. And I talked earlier, I didn't get to serve my country in the military. And so I see this as a fulfillment of, it's that little itch that I never got to do. So can I do that in public service? And I think that's one way that I can feel rewarded is to do that.
Do you think that you could win so much that you'd be tired, you'd just be exhausted from winning so much in whatever role you go? Just win till you can't, just can't stop winning. Be the greatest Department of Transportation, chairman of all time. We're in a new age. The golden age has started.
The Trump era of winning.
There's something again, and I'm 45, but traveling the country now, it has a different meaning. Like last night, we actually ate up the road at the casino. We went to Ruthie's, and the sun was setting behind us, and I said to my colleague that we were driving, I was like, man, look at that sunset and look at the generations of farmers that farm this ground. And again, I got the gray hairs and I'm getting older, but like there's this love that I have for this country more than I ever have. And even the people of this country. And how do we keep telling that story? And again, there's a lot of people out telling the story of agriculture and trucking, but I think we can provide a little bit different spin of it and kind of tell that story that still lives in our hearts. So that's my dream. I think the businesses keep growing, but how do we keep telling this great, beautiful story of farming and agriculture?
Yeah, that's awesome.
I really like that analogy you had of being the lighthouse. That's pretty cool. I like that. I never thought about it that way, but that's powerful.
Yeah, it was when that the person that told me that actually was an older gentleman at the gym, but I was telling about our companies, but he just said, Jared, you're like a lighthouse. And he's like, just remember, like, these ships, there's that lighthouse, and you can just kind of picture that. You got this bright beacon and these ships, all this is choppy water. And these guys are looking for, they're looking for help. They're looking for the light. And I'm not the light, but I can point them to the light. And that's the goal, is really showing them the love that we have.
2 questions and then we'll wrap it up. But who do you think has had the largest impact on your life and just where you've came to? I know that's a big one, but
yeah, I'll kind of go backwards. More recently, impact on my life. I didn't share this at all earlier, and there's a lot more to this story, but my father-in-law, my wife's dad, was a tremendous mentor of mine. Crazy successful businessman. He passed away a couple years ago, but he actually founded Sam's Club.
Wow.
He worked for Walmart way back in the 70s, and he was senior vice president. He was right underneath Sam Walton. And so he learned from one of the greatest businessmen of all time. Wow. And so when I met him, he was retired and out. And I can remember when I started BulkLoads, well, first he planted the seed to really to start the company. But anytime I had questions, he'd answer them. But every day he'd call me and grill me with questions and just like, hey, how's business? How's this going? But even thinking about the business, like, just remember the life value of a customer. That's what Sam Walton always told him. Don't think about today. What's the long-term value? Always think about the value of the membership that we instilled with our clients at Sam's Club. So there was just always this repetitive. So, when he passed away, I look back and I was like, my gosh, he gave me so much wisdom, and he was just right there alongside, coaching me along the way. So I think professionally, he was one that I have to give, all the credit to that. He's just, man, when you have that coach, were talking about our wives, but just from even that business guy to say, man, you got this, you can do this, and then there was another part of the story, we, as a business, we've been sued, and that's a whole nother podcast, but it was something that I thought, like, what did I do wrong? And is business over? And he's just like, don't worry about it. You got this, and there's been times through business, like we've had competitors. We're not the only ones out there that do what we do. And there's been times he's like, Jared, just remember Sam Walton told me that your competitors only make you better. Yep. Your competitors only make you better. And it's like in the moment, you're just like, I don't want to hear that, but like, I look back, it's like he did, because we got stronger. We developed more. We got grittier. We figured this out, and it made us better company and better for our clients. So, business-wise, my father-in-law, Rob Voss, just tremendous mentor. Miss him dearly. Think about him all the time. I think early on in life, I don't want to just point to several, had great grandparents. I always look back that some of the people that don't really get to see their grandparents. I had grandparents that were 1 mile up the road and 8 miles and got to see them. Both of my grandpas, but my grandpa on my mom's side, he's really, if I look back, really led me to my Christian faith. He was an old Marine guy, went into the concrete world, but Catholic, but he just had a servant's heart. I remember growing up and going to his house, and there'd be times like he'd have a homeless person living in his basement. And as a kid, I'm like, why are you doing this? And this doesn't make sense, and giving him money. And, he would take flowers to nursing homes on weekends. And you see this repetitive cycle of just servanthood and loving others. And so I credit so much of my faith to him really pointing me to there. But I think about my dad. I didn't talk about my dad, going through it all. I look at us growing up in the environment that we did, and sometimes you have regrets, and you think about all these things and why God did this and why my parents and all this. But I look at, man, my dad had to do something right, Mm-hmm. And he was always a man of few words, and I don't want to get emotional saying this, but like, man, I think all the times that he was there, and working at that sawmill, there's a lot of us, and you talk about, I love your podcast where you talk about farming, looking back, I got to work every day alongside of my dad. I got to see him sweating, modeling work, working with other employees, how he managed employees, how he treated other people. I got to see that every day, and I look back and it's like, it led me to be, some of the good traits. I got negative ones too, but like some of the good things that I possessed. And I thank him so much for instilling that into us. All of my brothers, they've all been successful. My sister's successful too. So I always like mom and dad, you had to do something right.
Yep, absolutely.
So man, I appreciate that question.
Yeah, no, that was great. I had one follow-up on when you met your father-in-law for the first time. Were you just like, when he said what he did, were you just like blown away? Were you just like, holy crap, like that is something.
When I met my father-in-law for the first time, he was a wealthy guy. He had this lake house, and I can remember my wife, we go down, we were dating at the time, but we drive down, and at his lake house, we get ready to pull in this whole blacktop road, big stone pillar gates, big pillars, big metal gates, and a little code, and I'm like, ooh, like who are we going to see here?
Yeah. Oh, so that was the first time that you'd met him.
Yeah. So we were going to meet him I was going to meet him for the very first time.
Did you meet your wife in college?
We met 4 years after.
Okay.
And out of all things, it was a rafting trip down in southern Missouri. But so we go down and go down this lake house, this crazy, huge and again, I'm not used to ever seeing anything of any of this caliber. But I remember going around back, and he had fixed like tri-tips, and we had some wine. I was never a wine drinker, but when you're in company. But I remember sitting at the table, and one of the first things he told me when he looked at me, he's like, Jared, do you know the value of $1? And I was like, yes, sir, I do. I was like, all right. And I think that was just something like, this guy, multimillionaire, but like wanted to know if I still knew, if I was humble enough to know the value of $1. Yep. And that was like the first time we met. But there was I was telling a colleague, like we were telling a lot of we call him, his name was Rob, but Rob isms. He was a very he was the king of the road. I'll say that on driving. He would honk at people, and he had a little bit of road rage. So I could tell you just multiple stories of riding with him. And my wife always like, you just fueled him on because you wanted to see him do that. But we'd be at a stoplight, and like there'd be someone in front of us, and the light would just turn green, and he'd just be hitting on, come on, like, come on, get going, I remember one time. Some lady cut us off, and he's like, "Oh my God, we're not." So we're chasing her. He's like, "I'm going to tell her." I'm like, "What are we doing?" He had, and I can say this because he's passed away. In his car, we'd be going down the interstate. He carried a fake badge, and dude, if somebody passed him, like going 80, 85, we would speed 90 miles an hour to go catch him, and he'd put down the window and throw the badge on him. He would pull the badge he'd hold the badge out there.
Slow down,
and all of a sudden,
panic.
I'm sitting there on the other side, just like covered up, like I don't want it, but all of a sudden you see that person all of a sudden just slow down and get behind, and I don't know why he thought it was his job to police the highways, but it's just like he got some.
Yep. That's hilarious.
That's awesome.
That is funny. There's going to be a few guys that probably do that after listening to this podcast. That would be funny.
He was not a patient person. I remember one time we were at his house, and he was waiting on this guy to turn on his sprinklers. It was in springtime. And we're waiting, and I knew he was getting hot. So I would say I kind of fueled his fire on this one. But I'm like, Rob, where is this guy? Man, you told him to be here at 4. He's not here. And he's like, I'm calling right now. So he gets on the phone. He puts him on speakerphone, and he's looking at me the whole time. Like, he's staring at me on speakerphone. And he's like, I forget this guy's name. He's like, Johnny, where the F are you? And this guy responds back like, oh, Rob, sorry, I'm on my way. I had to stop at Bass Pro and pick up some shotgun shells or whatever. And I could just see him in the eyes. Like, he's just like red. And he goes, do you think I'm standing here with my thumb up my blank and And like, I'm like, and he's staring at me the whole time. Like, he's wanting my reaction. I'm just like, and like there was this dead silence for like 10 seconds. And the guy's like, I'll be there in 5 minutes.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
Dude, I could share so many more, but it was
sounds like a
awesome.
hell of a guy. Sounds like a great man.
Awesome father-in-law to have.
I bet. That's awesome. Well, last question for you, and we'll hop off here. How do people learn more about what you're doing, want to get involved, want to work with you guys, potentially see what the content you're putting out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So simple. We're on all socials, so you can look on any social and type in BulkLoads. I'm super active on LinkedIn. That's kind of my go-to on there. So you can find me at Jared Flynn. Would love to connect. I would say this out there: if you're wherever you are, if there's something that I said that you might find interest in, man, reach out and talk to us. Maybe you're thinking about getting into trucking, wanting to see the opportunities out there. Get a hold of us. We can kind of walk you through. We do free demos. Maybe you're a trucking company, you're trying to scale up, and some of these technologies that we have can help you out. Maybe you're short on cash flow. This year has been tough for a lot of truckers. Freight rates have been down, so cash has been really tight. Our factoring services, highly recommend. We're super competitive. So I just say this: if there's anything that I've said in this podcast that we can help as a business, let us know. But I'm a people person, Twerk. That's why I reached out to you in the beginning. I love connecting with people. I see it as, there's a saying, your network is your net worth. And I firmly believe that. I think the people that you know in this industry can be very valuable. And again, if it's a fellow person, especially in agriculture, man, I can sit there and talk and shoot the bull. So yeah, please reach out.
Sweet. Well, Jared, we really appreciate you coming on, man. It was a real good episode. Hope you guys got some value. If you did, share the show with the people that you know. Leave a review on Spotify or Apple. Check out Farmer Grade. Use code BarnTalk to save 10% off your next order. And we'll see you back here next week for another episode.